Right now, with travel and site restrictions enforced around the globe, it's never been more critical to manage site visits within an organisation. Using a kiosk or tablet-based visitor application is an incredibly efficient way to manage visitation and enforce site rules by making person movements workflow actionable, historically retrievable, and highly visible at all times. Over the next hour, I'll take you step by step in real time through the process of building your own site visitation application and demonstrate how easy it is to get a powerful app up and running very quickly in Microsoft Power Apps. Let's begin. You are looking at the completed application that we're going to be building today. So let me quickly run through this with you. So if I just run that application up. So the first thing I want to do is just search for myself here, and I don't see that's anything currently been set up in the site manifest. So I'm most likely they weren't ready, well, they weren't expecting my visit today. So I can click new sign on. And I choose myself from the select employee. I choose the site that I'm visiting. What date am I leaving? Let's say I'm leaving tomorrow and I'm doing a site audit. Now if I scroll down, we can see here that we've got a couple of questions here that my company has determined that are mandatory to be completed before anyone visits this site. So the first one is am I experiencing any of the following symptoms? Sore throat, dry cough, fever, or tiredness? So I'm going to answer no to that. Have you recently returned from a location outside of this country? No, I haven't. And now I'm able to declare information provided here as the truth. Click save, and then if I just go down and have a look at myself again, I can see that I've completed a site manifest for this date to that date, and I am now permitted to arrive on site. So that's effectively the sort of level of restrictions that have been placed within inside of my company. Now, the other way this could work is that if I just go to Sharepoint, because we're using Sharepoint as our data source here, if I click on new, I can add let's put Melbourne HQ and date from today and date to today and traveler, selecting myself, and this is just a standard people picker, and I click save. So if I go back to the application, just click a refresh. You can see here there's another site visit here. So let's say I've arrived at the Melbourne HQ, and I can see that there is already a site visitor sign on, or there's a site visit in our manifest already for my visit today. So I can click on this, I can open up that visit, I can put site audit is the reason why I'm here today. I don't have a sore throat or those other symptoms, and I have not traveled recently outside of this country, so I'm clicking no on that, and then I declare everything is the truth. Go back down, and now that is showing up as completed. Green light, I'm able to enter the site. So today our application will handle employees of our company. Now you could easily make a modification to this application to also handle external visitors or people that are not a part of our organization. And you could also set this up where this isn't necessarily completed from a kiosk or an iPad that's handed to me. It could be done on my own device, and in those circumstances you just wouldn't add people picker. You could automatically detect who's logged onto the device and therefore show the site manifest that's specific to me. But in this scenario, we're going to just go through the application, because I think in most cases this will be run from a kiosk or a tablet or something that is handed to me when I arrive site, or just before I'm going to board a plane. I'm handed an iPad and I can fill that out, and everyone can feel okay that I have completed my site visit manifest, and then I'm permitted to visit site. So the first thing we should do is create a SharePoint list that we will store our site visits visits in. So if I go up to Sharepoint, I've got a site here called demo, so I'm just going to put it in here. And let me create a new, go site contents. Let's create a new list. And I'm just going to call this site visits. Right, the way I like doing this is just going to list settings. And in here I'll go create column. First field is going to be date from, and that will be a date and time. Day 2. There's also going to be a date time. Keep going. Next column will be traveler, and that will be a personal group. People only. Next column will be our reason for a visit. That's going to be a multiple line of text, and we'll just make that plain text because we're just storing text in there, but we want to be able to store multiple lines. So next one, we're just going to create a Boolean column, and we'll call this symptoms. Look up and down, we just want a yes or no. And by default, we're going to make that no. Let's create another yes or no column. And this one will be traveled recently. Default that to no. So we also want to store the status so we can track make that capital. And that's just going to be a single line of text, but we'll store the status of our site visit. So just in case we wanted to down the track add like an extra workflow there. So if we would want to reject site visits or just track how they are currently progressing. And of course, we'll use the status field when we're creating site visits, when we're preempting a site visit and we're creating it before the site visit's actually taken place. So say my manager creates my site visit for me, and we can use that manifest to sort of track upcoming site visits as well as track when the person's actually arrived, and ticks off to say they have now arrived and they have now entered site. So it's a good way to track the progress of how site visits are happening. And we just need a single line of text for that. So let's go ahead and create that column. And the only other thing I want to do is create a column called completed date. So we know the date that was actually we've signed off, or when when the visitor has actually signed in to site. So I guess that's more of an auditing field, and I see that being used that we just want to enforce, or we want to make sure that that visitors are doing their site visit on the day, that we're not seeing those records sort of completed before a visitor has actually arrived on site. So really, like I said, really just for auditing purposes. So let's click on OK. And I think that's all the fields we're going to need for our SharePoint list. So if we go back to PowerApps, let's create a blank canvas and let's call this site visits. And we're going to make that a tablet app because, like I said, we're planning this app is going to be something that's going to be used like as a kiosk or on an iPad device at a reception. So that will be handed over by reception to our site visitor, or it'll be sitting on the side there on the counter for everyone to actually use. So let's click on. It's going to spin up. Now remember, we had some fancy. We had the sort of screen looking fairly fancy. So let's just quickly do that. I'm not going to spend too much time prettying this up, but I do want the app to look good for our. Well, I want the UI to be presentable because it's. We want it to be clear and simple for users when they're arriving to be able to fill this out. So let's just rename that screen to home and just show you quickly how I do the formatting. I just use these shapes here. So if we and create nice borders, and if I just copy and paste that, actually if I copy that and paste that, I get exactly the same size for down the bottom. So now we've got a nice screen border. And if you remember, I also had an image in the top right hand corner here. So let's go ahead and do that. Add image file. Just browse my computer. I don't think this screen is actually coming up on the capture, but when I click on that, it's just bringing up another dialog box where I can browse on my computer to where I've saved those images. So let me just go in and find those. And I want that image there, it's the one I liked. We just resize that. And we need a label. Let's make that text. Bold. Actually, maybe bold's too much. We don't need bold. And I'm just going to say site visitor sign on for the text. Just shrink that down a little bit. Okay, so the next thing that we had on here is a people picker. Now I've got another video that shows you how to do the people picker. And if you haven't built one before in PowerApps, you can follow the link. Well, I'll put the link on the screen right now. There you go. So there's a link to people picker. I'll also put it down in the in the video description, just in case you've missed that link or you don't see them on your device. So that video will show you how to set up a people picker in PowerApps, but I'm going to just really quickly run through it right now, so you may not even need to watch that video. So what we use for people picker is a combo box. Let's insert a label here. And the label is going to say search employees. And we will make that bold. And in here for items, well, we're going to need a connection to Office 365 users. So let's add that to our app, and that's done. And in here, for the items, we want Office 365 users dot search users. And in here, well, we can see we're being prompted and we've been shown how this actually works. So we need to set up a search term, and the search term will be, go back, so we call this combo box 1 dot, and there'll be a property in here called search text. Now, if we just take a quick look, if we select our combo box, we take a look at our properties on the right-hand side here. I don't want to select don't want to allow it to select multiple users, and I do want to allow searching. So just make sure those two properties are switched that way and it'll work correctly. Now, the next thing, well, let's just quickly make sure that's working. Oh, okay. It's not working. So another thing we have to do here, we have to set up the fields. So if I select our combo box and I click fields, we want this combo box to operate like a person, the layout to be a person. Now we don't want an image, but our primary text will be, I like making it display name. Secondary text will make male, and our search field will be display name. So if we take a look now, we can see Chino does stuff. Or if I search for, say, so this is now a search box that will search my entire organization and return back a person record for whoever I've selected. Right, so the next thing, let's move this up a little bit. So the next thing I will need is a gallery. Let's just do a blank gallery. And we want that gallery connected to Sharepoint. So we need another data connection. Sharepoint. And we get this little pop up on the slide box on the right here that says where we want to connect to Sharepoint, and we created that. We created that list under our demo site. When we put the URL to our demo site in, we can see a whole list of different different lists that are available within that site, and the one we just created was site visits. So click on connect to that, and now that gallery is connected to that list, which is great. We just need to add a few fields in here now. First field we want to show is okay, so let's just back up a sec. I hadn't actually connected that gallery to that data connection. I did set up the data connection, but I haven't connected the gallery to it yet. So if I select that gallery and I go items and I want the items to be site visits. All right, now if we add a label here, and the label will be title, perfect. We add another label. And if we take a quick look here, we can see our labels are being created inside of our gallery, which is how we want them to be created. So the next field we want to show is date from, perfect. And I'm just going to copy and paste that. And we want that date to. So during this demo, I'm going to be doing lots of like little shortcuts that I normally do while I'm developing. Now, I guess you may or may not like doing those sort of shortcuts. So for example, when I'm putting these labels in, rather than going in and clicking new label, I will just copy and paste them, and I just find sometimes that's quicker. Let's shrink that down a bit. So we've got title, date from, date to, and we also want to show status. Let's name these labels just to make it a little bit easier for us to find them. That was date from. And let's name the gallery as well. Okay, so the other thing I like doing is putting a border around our gallery. Let's just make it dashed. All right, so I'll just select the home screen again, and I will insert a heading up here. I'm going to call that site visit manifest. Shrink that down a bit more. And let's insert another label. Call that title. Let's make that a little smaller. We'll bold it, but we'll make it a gray color. Copy and paste that. Ooh. Okay. Now let's put some data into our list so we can just see what we're working with here. So if I go edit data, let's create a new record. And we'll call it, say, Melbourne HQ. Oh. Date from today, date to today, and the traveler will be Chino stuff. Let's click save. go back to site visits and just refresh our data connection because we've updated our data. We just need to click a refresh and we can see that we've got a record in here now. So it'll allow us to place our headings and that a little bit easier. Make that a bit shorter here. Oh. Okay, so if I just go back to a list, I noticed I hadn't done one other thing here. List settings. So status. If I create a new record inside of my Sharepoint list, I want this default value to be required always, or to say required. I don't want it just to be created as blank. And you'll see why I want that later, but let's just go ahead and do that. If I go back up here and if I just edit this record, I want that. We need to edit this manually now because I created this before I'd set that field, but now from now on, when I create new records inside of my Sharepoint list, they'll always say required in status. So if I go back up and let's just refresh that data connection again. Great, I can see required there. So now we've got our gallery here. We can see we're displaying all of our site visits within that gallery. So all the records that are inside our site visit list are showing up here, but we don't want that. We only want to show the visits for a selected user. So we need to make a little change to our items value inside of our gallery. So if I select the gallery and I go filter, so let's wrap this around a filter function, and we want to filter travel. Do I call it traveler? Display name, because remember it's the people picker in the Sharepoint list is a record, so the field name is called traveler, but we want the display name property is equal to people picker selected display name. And status is equal to required or status is equal to completed. Now you might be asking, why am I also doing a search for, or also doing a filter, I should say, on status equals required and completed, when they're the only two statuses that we have in our list? Now why I've done that is because it gives you the option later on for a site administrator to go through and actually change this status to say archived. So, or even having a workflow run daily or even monthly, or a manual trigger that will archive all of our site visits once they've reached a certain date or a certain age, or say once the site visit is completed, you could have a workflow that would run that would set the status to archive. Now what that will mean is that archived statuses will never be displayed inside of our site visitor sign-on, which is kind of the behavior you want, because you really don't want site visits that are in the past appearing in your manifest, because they're I mean, they're redundant. You don't really need to see them anymore inside of our application. All right, so let me just move that down a little bit. Okay, so now we're filtering our gallery by our traveler name and its status. So if I go through and say select someone else in the organization, I can see there's nothing inside of our search manifest. So let's go back and just what we want to do now is give the user the ability to be able to fill out our existing record here. So our existing site visit. We want to give the user the ability to be able to fill this out and complete our site visit sign on. So what I'm going to do, let me first add a button here. Oh, no, I don't want that one. Select our search. Next. Now you can see I'm making sure when I'm adding these elements to our gallery, I'm selecting the row. Otherwise, if I don't select the row in the gallery when I'm adding an item, it will add it outside of the gallery and therefore it won't be a part of that record. So we want this to be a part of each record inside of our gallery list. And that button, we'll just put a hold on that button for now, but we've got that there. The only other thing I like doing here as well, I like putting a little separator in. So if I select that row and I add, looking for a rectangle again. It's probably a little thick. So if I go up to properties on the rectangle, and find height. Let's make that 1 pixel. That's great. Right, so the easy way, well, actually there's no easy way to do this. We need to create a new screen, but we want a scrollable screen, because our form may actually get larger, or we want a scrollable section in our screen. So we need to select that scrollable screen type. And we're going to call this screen complete sign on. Canvas sign on. Now, I don't want some of these elements here, so I'm just going to delete them. And the first thing that happens is we get a little error. So if I click on the edit error, you can see the Y is being set by a formula. So I'm just going to put 1 there. So note here, my canvas is set to, if we look at the height of the canvas, it's set to 504, but the data card height, let's just rename that. The data card height is set to 800. So what that effectively does is it creates a area inside of our canvas that's larger. The data card is larger than the actual window, the canvas window, and we get this little scrollable section. Now, if we go back home, I'm just going to grab this. This is an example of me cutting corners here. If I go to complete sign on and I just click paste and select that image, I'm going to change it, and I'm going to use that one. Here I just want this to say complete your site visitor sign on. move that down a bit and bring that up a bit. Find that as well. Sometimes when you're moving this canvas around, it will mess with those. It'll mess with those heights and widths. So yeah, it's a little bit fiddly, but I find if I work with the actual heights and the height values here rather than trying to move it around with the UI, I get a better result. But anyway, that looks good how I wanted. But the other thing that might make this a little bit easier to work with, let's just put a border on here as well. Now we can see the border of our canvas here, which makes it a little bit easy to work with. We can see our window, which is awesome. Okay, what do we need next? Well, we need our form, and we need to add some fields to our data card to do that, because we want our fields inside of our form to be scrolling. So first field is our reason for our visit. Let's make that bold. And then we want to insert a text input. Scroll that all the way across and down. Now, one of the properties on our text input is we want to change our mode from single line to multi-line. Because remember, we set that in our Sharepoint list as a multi-line. Let's just rename that. I'm going to make sure that I'm renaming all these fields, because when we go to do our patch, they'll be way easy to reference and our field in our patch when we know when it's got sort of a sensible name, rather than just having the default names that that PowerApps gives you. So the next field I want is, let's just copy that label. Next field I want is a we need another label after that. Let's see, are you experiencing any of the following make that a little bigger. We won't bold this field because we're just going to list now the different conditions. We go up to our text and we just hold Shift and Enter, and we can have a new row. Shift and Enter. Oh. Oh yeah, we do have a space between there. And our last one is tiredness. Bit and move that in a bit, and we're going to make that kind of like a dark red as well. All right, now if we remember the answer to this question we're expecting is a yes or no. So they are inside of PowerApps. A yes or no is determined via a radio button. Now I want my radio buttons to look side on rather than up down, if you know what I mean. So I don't want them to go like that. I want them to be crossways. So it's under advanced, under layout, we got vertical. If we remove vertical, we've also got an option here for horizontal. So now we got these horizontal radio buttons. I'm going to call this RDO symptoms. The other thing I like doing here is just reordering these to the back. So all the labels for all of these fields, I just like reordering them down to the back. So I've got all my actual input fields at the top, and that is just a peculiar thing that I like doing when I'm developing Power Apps, where I just push all the labels down to the bottom, and that way I don't have to look at them and like wonder, do these contain values that I need to manipulate or change, or am I just dealing with these values at the top? So it just orders things a little bit better on my screen and while I'm building my Power App. Okay, so the values we want to have here, or the items we want to have here, is true and false. Because we're answering, we've set this field up as a Boolean inside of SharePoint, so we need to pass it the true or false or yes or no, depending on if we are experiencing the following or not. Okay, so the next question we were asking was, so I'm just going to copy that field and that and paste that. Again, just send that, reorder that to the back. And this radio button will be called traveled recently. Select that and select that. And just drag that down. Grab that. And in here we want this to say have you traveled recently? Have you returned recently from a location outside of this country? And just in brackets here, put within the last 14 days. Expand that out. And this should already be set up for us because we just copied and pasted it from the other radio button that we created. So the final thing we need on this screen is a button to be able to click on yes, and to complete our visitor sign-on. So if we just select a button here, we're going to have that all the way down the bottom. Let's make it a nice big button. I'm also going to change the color to green. And the text I want it to say is, so if I select the button, under the text is, I declare all information provided here is the truth. And under this button, we want to be able to commit that record to our SharePoint list. We're going to use a patch command to do that. So if on our button, if I go to on select, Here we want to do patch. I want to patch to site visits. And we're patching our gal site visits selected ID. So what we're doing there is we're just patching the record that we selected, because remember we've selected a record from our gallery, and we've selected and that record is the site visit. So we've selected our site visit from the selection in the gallery, and this is our reference to that record. So now we're updating that existing record here by adding this reference. And if you haven't used patch much before, I will link to a video of mine that will give you a bit more information, and will show you how to set up patch and give you a really simple example on how to patch to a SharePoint list. It should be appearing on the screen right about now. If you don't see that link, I'll also put it in the description below, but let's continue. Right, I'm just going to format that, because I like to have it sort of set up like this when I am creating my patch statement. So my reason for visit is going to be text value. I think it was symptoms. And that is going to be RDO symptoms selected value. Excellent. So all I'm doing here is on the left hand side, this is the column name from our data source, and on the right hand side is the value that I'm patching to it. So these have to equate to our column names in our SharePoint list. Next line is, I think it was recently traveled. Let me just double check that. Traveled recently. It's going to be RDO, traveled recently, selected value. And all we want to capture here is the completed date, and that is just going to be today. One last thing, we also want to update the status. And we can update the status to completed. So if we go back home, let's test that out. So just before I do that, one other thing that I would like to have here is I would like to show this status field from, I would like to show it as you know, a different color depending on what the status is. So I'd like to show green when it's completed, but red when it's required. So what I need to do there is I need to find the fill, and you can see its current fill is 0, but I just have to use an if statement here. So if this item status is equal to required, I want to return back that red. Otherwise, just make it green. Let's also just change the text to always be white as well. And let's maybe bold it. And align it as well. All right, that looks much better and a lot more like my initial example that I showed you guys. So let's test that patching and let's test that update of an existing record. So say I open the site visitor manifest, or I'm handed the iPad and I check Chino does stuff. I can see that there is an existing manifest, existing visitor record in there for me. I can click on, oh, one thing we've missed. So that button has to navigate to our screen. And I've also thought I've missed another thing as well. So in here, after we've patched our record, we want to navigate back to our home screen. This will be an uncover. So if we go back home, this will be a cover. And that just sets the animation when we're navigating. All right. Once again, select me under search employees. I click on site manifest. And I can see these questions. I'll be like site audit. Am I experiencing any of the following? No. Have I traveled in the last 14 days? No. And I declare that's the truth, and now I've completed. So functionally that's working, but one of the things I definitely want to prevent people from doing is pressing this button when our fields haven't been completed yet. So we definitely want to capture all of our answers. So we need to quickly go into the button display mode. We don't always want this to be clickable. So in here, we need a little bit of logic. So if our if is blank, RDO symptoms, or let's just copy that again. RDO travel recently. Now we need to actually also add this as well. We need to reference the value inside of, or the value we've selected, not just the entire field, because they're radio buttons. Or is blank again. Text reason. If any of those are blank, we want the display mode to be disabled. Otherwise, make it edit. So say I removed one of those, now I can't click on it. So the other thing we want to make sure we do that, and this is just a peculiarity with PowerApps, we want to make sure, and when we're using patch command, we want to make sure that these fields have been reset every time we go to this screen. So on visible, just want to quickly add a reset for each one of these. Okay. So if we go home. Now the other thing we want to make sure we're doing is that we're only showing this button when our record is required, not completed. So we want to hide that button. So that's the visible property. Again, we need some more logic here. If this item status is equal to required, then we want to pass back true, or we want it to be visible. Otherwise, we don't want it to be visible. And this will just make sure that we can't click on that record again. All right, so let's quickly we'll just generate another. Let's generate another record here. Again, we'll make that today. And I'll select myself again. Save. Let's refresh our data connection. You should see another one in there. So if I go in and now I don't have that option for that because the status is completed, but I can open this one. Site audit. My experience in, I can see I can't can't declare it until I've done all my answers, and now I can declare that's the truth and I've completed that record. So the only thing we have left is the new sign-on. So when a record hasn't, or when a visit hasn't already been set up for us in our site manifest, we want the ability for the user to click on a new sign-on and to go ahead and just create a new record in our list. So I'm going to get a little cheaty with this and just copy or duplicate that screen. You know, I don't really think this is cheaty because Microsoft give you the option of duplicating the screen and duplicating different components of the screen. I actually think it's a pretty smart way of doing things. But, you know, feel free to leave comments below if you think I am being cheaty in this. Otherwise, definitely leave a comment if you think I'm being smart about it. All right, let's continue. On the screen, let's just call this new. Let's just call this new sign-on. And we pretty much have got, we want to do exactly the same thing. But let's just move this field down, up a little bit, these fields down a little bit. And if I go back to home, I'm going to copy this people picker, and inside of my data card I'm going to paste it. Instead of saying search employee, I'm going to say select employee, and for the people picker I'm just going to call this underscore new, so I know it's new. I'm going to change all these fields to new, underscore new, just so I know that they are for when I'm doing the new sign-on rather than completing an existing one. Let's just move that label to the back. All right. Now pretty much all these fields are going to be exactly the same. But in here, a couple of things. Yep, I can see they are all, that's all correct, but here I don't want to reference my existing record. So I just remove that entire reference to the record that we selected in the gallery. And what this will do is it'll create a new record when we click on it, rather than when we run patch, rather than updating an existing record. So the only other thing here that we need to do is on our display mode, want to add, and you see these values, like by duplicating that field, these values have they've also changed. So even though when I duplicated those fields, these fields were still validly pointing to the completed sign-on field, but because I went through the process of duplicating it, by default it will repoint these functions to the new screen, or all the fields that are relevant to this screen, rather than the fields that are relevant to the original screen. So a lot of the work's already done for you, which is great. But I do need to, because I've added a new field here, I do need to add our people picker. And I'll just say display name. And I want to wrap this, sorry for doing this back to front, in a isBlank function. So I also want to check if that's blank. We need to add another field here. Okay, let's just copy that. Site are you visiting today? And let's select a drop down. Not sure where that button came from. Just let's select a drop down, and in here our fields will be our sites that we have. So we've got Brisbane, factory, and this is just for the demo. Obviously in your organization, this would be sourced from a list of all your sites that potentially will receive visitors. Now that could be a separate database, it could be sourced from a Sharepoint list, or it could be hard-coded inside of your Power App. But for this example, just keep it simple, I'm going to hard-code it. And I think the other one was Newcastle Port. Okay, and just to sort of, so it doesn't default to the first option, I'm just going to create a, and I like doing this with my drop down, especially when they're hard coded, just adding an entry at the beginning, select. So that way I can detect if this hasn't been selected or not. So in our patch, well, in our, let's change the name of this drop down, site visit, site location. Okay, so we need a bit more logic here first. So in our display mode, add another field here, or drop down site location selected value equals three dots. Yep. Okay. All right, so that's that. And in our patch, remember we're saving this to the title in this example, just using the default title field in Sharepoint. And this will be our drop down site location selected value. Right, the last thing I need to do here, and this is the complicated bit, is I need to save the traveler data that I am getting from this people picker to Sharepoint. Now, I mentioned earlier that field is a special type of field. It is like a person record, and we can't just patch it. Like I can't just go, I think I called that, did I call that traveler? Yep, traveler. So I can't just go traveler equals people picker. This isn't going to work. That's not going to work because that is a text value. That's not going to work either because the record type is different. So how do we actually patch that person field from our combo box back into our Sharepoint person field? So there's actually a format to this record, and we can do it, but rather than typing it all out, I'm just going to paste it in here. All right, so that is the format that you're going to need for that people picker to patch that people picker field back to Sharepoint. Okay, so let's give that a, let's go back to our home. So we need a way to be able to create a new visitor. And let me just insert a button. I think in the original app, I had a big green button about here. And that. Let's make this text a bit bigger. Perfect. And on here, we just want to, when we click it, we just want to select, where are you? We want to navigate to our new sign on. Okay, get that right finally. All right. So in this scenario, I can see a couple of completed ones, but I don't have a sign-on for my site visit today. So let me click on new sign-on. Let me select myself. Which site am I visiting? I'm visiting the Newcastle port today. And I'm also doing a site audit. Still don't have a sore throat or any of those other symptoms. I have not visited, and now I can declare all my information provided here is the truth. Click on that, and I have a completed. All right, so we do have a problem still here. Let's just have a look at our patch. All right, so if we look at the data we captured here, we didn't save date from date to. So let's go back to our new sign-on. We need a couple more fields. Let's just grab all these again. Oh, not that one. And move. Oh. Move all these down. And this is going to be date leaving site. Okay, so date leaving, and in our, we want to add a couple of things here. In our patch, date from is today. And date to is from our date leaving selected date. And we just want some logic here as well. We want to make sure that those fields aren't left blank. So our display mode, we just want to add another or DTE date leaving selected date, and wrap that around a is blank function. Let's go back to our home. Let's try that again. Run the app. All right, you can see a couple of things here. I'm not resetting these fields, so let's just, we've got to remember every time we add a new field to this screen, we have to reset it. Okay. Go back to home. Let's try that again. Click on New. Select Chino stuff. Which site am I visiting? Newcastle Port. What date am I leaving? Let's leave tomorrow. Site audit. Nope. Nope. If I scroll down, I've got my new site manifest. I've recorded from the from date, the to date, and now it's completed. So that covers our really simple site visitor app. If, this would be something that would be really simple to add more questions to, or say, for example, if you wanted to also check if the person had the appropriate PPE equipment, you could just add that as another field in your SharePoint list and add it to your forms. You could also add an additional process there where when a site visit has been completed, a summary of it gets emailed to, say, the receptionist or even a manager above that, so they can review the site visitors. You could also have a summary of the day's site visitors emailed to a manager. I see this app also, you could add extra restrictions in there or extra sort of functionality where if someone does say yes or no to some of those questions, you could have it run a different workflow process where you don't necessarily get a status of completed. You might get a status of denied access or further instruction at that point. And I also see possibly writing another app or creating a separate app that supports this app for the receptionist, where they can actually go through and review all the site visits and make modifications or make updates as they require to those records. And that would kind of work in tangent with the actual the kiosk app or our iPad app, where this is really designed just to fill out your site visit, but then there's a supporting app that processes those applications. Hopefully you got something out of today, and you can take what I've shown you here and expand on it and create something that will really work within your organization. Hey, hit the like button if you liked this video, comment something in the comments section below, and of course subscribe to stay up to date with all my latest videos. I thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next video.